What is going on, everyone? Ken, also known as Wiltshire here, and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'll be showing you guys my brand new computer build, and this is the computer that I'll be using for all my videos, streaming, and such from now on, and that is Colossus 3.0 Threadripper Edition. With that said, let's get into what kind of parts are in my computer, and we'll go over the specifications of each individual part. Okay, so let's start off with the reason why this build is called Colossus 3.0 Threadripper Edition, the CPU. So for the CPU, I'm using a AMD RYZEN Threadripper 1950X. So the 1950X is rocking an STR4 socket type, and it's just freaking massive compared to any CPU I've ever used. It has 16 cores, 32 threads, 64 PCIe lanes, which I really need desperately because I have expansion cards at the wazoo. It has a base frequency of 3.4 GHz, a turbo frequency of 4.0 GHz, 32 megabytes of L3 cache, and it's got a 180 watt TDP. So those are the specifications of the beast that is the 1950X. So moving on to the next part. The next part that we're going to have a look at is the graphics card that I decided to go with for this build. And that graphics card would be an ASUS Strix GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. So the card is compatible with PCI Express 3.0. It comes equipped with 11 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, has a 352-bit memory with interface. It is DirectX 12 compatible as well. The card also has 3,584 CUDA cores. The base clock for the card is 1,594 megahertz, and the boost clock is 1,708 megahertz. So as you can see, that's quite the beefy graphics card for a computer. I plan on doing a lot of 4K content for my channel, so it is good to have a graphics card that is able to pump out the 4K resolution in a high frame rate. It also has ASUS Aura Sync, and all my parts are ASUS Aura Sync in this build, so that's a plus too. So that is the GPU, so let's move on to the next part. The next part we're going to look at is the motherboard, and the motherboard that I just had to go with was the ASUS ROG Zenith Extreme. So the Zenith Extreme is rocking an X399 chipset, also has the ability to support quad channel memory, and I do need that speed for my RAM, so that is excellent. And the RAM that I got with this build is quad channel. It also comes with a 10 gigabit Ethernet card, which I will be putting in the build, although I won't really need to be using it that much. It also has 3 M.2 slots, and I will be using M.2 in this build. It also comes with the ability to use 0, 1, and 10 RAIDs. So that is extremely important. I'll probably be using a RAID 1 setup for my archival hard drives, which I just lost one, unfortunately, the other day. It also has 8 DIMM slots, so you can put tons of RAM in this thing. It also has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which the Wi-Fi is AC. Next, we might as well talk about the CPU cooler that I'll be using for the 1950X, and that is the Enermax Lictech TR4 360 all-in-one CPU cooler. That name is a little bit of a mouthful, but there's not much to say about this CPU cooler. It's got 3 120mm fans, hence the 360 in the name. It covers 100% of the integrated heat spreader on the Threadripper, and that's a big deal because not a lot of coolers actually cover 100% of the IHS on the 1950X, or even the 1920X. And it's made for overclocking. There's not much else to say about it. And last but not least, these two parts, and they are quite the powerhouse parts themselves. They just look kind of weird shooting the boxes individually, so I put the two together, maybe to save some time as well. So let's get into the RAM first. The RAM that I decided to go with for this build is G-Skill Trident Z RGB. Now, it is DDR4 3200, so it runs at 3200 megahertz, or can be overclocked to if the motherboard and CPU can be stable using it. The memory is quad channel, so it will go along well with my motherboard, which supports quad channel memory. It has a 16 CAS latency. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my hands on a 14 or 15 CAS latency version of this kit. I do believe Ryzen likes the CAS to be lower and its timings to be tighter. So this will have to do, unfortunately. I went with a 32 gigabyte 4x8 gigabyte kit, and it also supports XMP 2.0 if you want to use that for overclocking, but I will be doing some manual tweaking to my overclocking myself. I won't be using the XMP profiles. It is also running with 1.35 volts. And next up is the SSD, the NVMe SSD that I'll be using for this build, and that is the Samsung 960 Pro M.2 SSD. It has a max sequential read of 3,500 megabits per second and a max sequential write of 2,100 megabits per second. And that is absolutely insane. It beats the crap out of anything that I've ever used, especially my two SATA SSDs that were in RAID 0. It couldn't even compete with it. The SSD is also 512 gigabytes, so I have quite a bit of storage to play with. 512 megabytes of cache in the thing, and it's a M.2 2280 in size. So that wraps up all the brand new components that I'll be using in this build. So let's get on to the case and the power supply that I'll be using for this build. So as some of you may have already guessed and have seen my previous build videos, I'll be using my Corsair 800D case because it is my favorite case of all time, even though it doesn't have that much airflow in the front, or actually just none at all, because it's got that hot swappable bay drive and that brushed aluminum finish on it. But I really like the case and I really like it aesthetically, and it does a good job of cooling, even though it doesn't have the front fans there. It's also using my Seasonic Platinum 1000 watt power supply. That thing has served me very well for the past 4 or 5 years that I've had it, and I'm going to be reusing it again for this build. So before putting the new parts into the computer case, I decided to clean all the dust out of the fans in the computer case and everything else, just so I have a clean slate going into this build, so I don't have to take apart the computer in a month's time just to clean the dust out. So that is all the parts that I'll be using in this computer today. If you guys want to watch the montage, sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you want to skip the montage of me building the computer, then go ahead and skip to the time code that is in the bottom right-hand corner. Oh. There's that. Drivers.
RYZEN Threadripper.
Trigger. Yeah, no. Like, overkill enough? Thing's huge.
Oh, is that it?
That's it.
Oh my god.
Loosen that a little bit.
I can hear it trying to catch.
Okay, that one's done. That one's done. classical guy. And there's your SSD installation. There you go.
Muscle shot. Jesus Christ, dude. You got some muscles! Anyway. There we go. That's the way we wanted to do it.
Also, we don't need.
Oh!
Like that. Zip ties. Alright.
That thing is a beast.
Oh my god, it's so thick. It's thick with two C's.
Thick with two C's.
Thick with two C's.
Holy shit.
Static electricity. Yay.
It's a good thing we're standing on carpet.
Oh yeah, totally. Uh-oh. We're hitting that. We're hitting that.
Is that bad?
Maybe. I don't know. Oh boy, oh boy.
She fit?
Yeah, we got it.
Hey, hey.
We got room for a capture card, boy. Excellent. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to see. There we go.
Can you do like one at a time?
There we go.
There you go. There you go. Haha. You can always build this kickstand.
It's just this one's long.